Ezekiel's arrival in the vibrant world of Viridia was an event that defied all expectations, a testament to a power that slumbered within his infant frame. At the tender age of 2, during the solemn ritual of the temple's magical assessment, his latent abilities erupted in a dazzling display. While other children might manage fleeting sparks or rudimentary gestures, Ezekiel, a child previously more enamored with mundane toys like his cherished plasma ball, achieved something unprecedented. Upon touching both the crystalline sphere and its base, a focused beam of pure golden light lanced forth, an undeniable manifestation of potent magical energy. The onlookers were astounded, the temple elders whispering in disbelief at the raw power emanating from such a small child. Despite this extraordinary awakening, Ezekiel's physical limitations as an infant presented a significant barrier to actively wielding the magic he so clearly possessed. His engagement with Viridia's arcane energies was thus relegated to the internal realms of meditation. Within the quiet spaces of his mind, he began the intricate process of mapping the volatile currents of Viridia's unsubmicals, the fundamental particles of its reality. He became an observer, a silent student of the magical arts as practiced by his family. He watched Kaelin effortlessly conjure mighty walls of earth, each clod of soil bending to his will. He marveled at Lyra's dancing fireballs, vibrant spheres of heat and light that flickered and twirled at her command. He observed Lord Riel's precise control over wind-guided arrows, each projectile unerringly finding its mark. And he was particularly captivated by Lady Alara's fluid artistry, seamlessly blending the elemental forces of earth and fire in the creation of her pottery, transforming inert clay into vessels of beauty and utility. Ezekiel approached these displays not merely with childish wonder, but with the analytical mind of a programmer dissecting lines of code. He intuitively grasped the underlying principles governing their magical feats, the subtle manipulations of energy and the intricate interplay of elements. Though his infant form prevented him from replicating these grand displays, his mind was actively absorbing and cataloging the fundamental mechanics. Driven by an innate desire for order and understanding, a habit perhaps carried over from his previous life, Ezekiel embarked on a peculiar project. On the pristine surface of his bedroom wall, much to the initial dismay of the household staff, he scratched a personal SWOT analysis. In his rudimentary script, he detailed his perceived strengths: ancient soul, high processing sleep, good C, acknowledging the lingering essence of his past existence. He listed his weaknesses: mortal brain, no talk good, tiny, Xylos no listen, keenly aware of his current physical limitations and his inability to articulate his complex thoughts. He identified opportunities for growth: learn fire earth wind, see new world, more peeps, brain big later, his inherent curiosity and the prospect of expanding his understanding fueling his aspirations. Finally, he considered potential dangers: forget all thing? Big people watch? Xylos mad. A primal awareness of the uncertainties of his new reality and the enigmatic entity known as Xylos. This seemingly act of childish defacement, however, did not go unnoticed. Lady Alara, entering his room and initially taken aback by the markings, soon recognized the underlying pattern, the deliberate categorization that hinted at a mind far beyond his years. Intrigued by his intellectual inclination, she took it upon herself to introduce him to the common Viridian tongue. For Ezekiel, the former Earth programmer accustomed to the precise logic of code, mastering this new language was not simply about acquiring the means to communicate. He intuitively understood that it was a crucial key, a fundamental step towards fully integrating his two lives, his past and his present. He saw the potential to unlock the secrets of Viridia itself, to understand its underlying structure, and perhaps even, in time, to rewrite its very fabric, the fundamental code that governed its existence. With the invaluable key of literacy now firmly in his grasp, Ezekiel gained access to a treasure trove of knowledge within the vast archives of the Manhwa estate. The family library, a sprawling collection of dusty tomes bound in aged leather and intricate scrolls penned in elegant script, became his new interface to Viridia. Its contents were a deluge of data, a torrent of information that his ancient soul eagerly set about processing. Lady Alara would often find him in the quiet corners of the library, perched precariously on a stool, his small form seemingly swallowed by the towering shelves and the weighty volumes. His golden eyes, sharp and perceptive, would scan the ancient script with an uncanny speed and comprehension, absorbing the accumulated wisdom of generations. He devoured Viridia's chronicles of old, tracing the rise and fall of kingdoms and the ebb and flow of magical eras. He immersed himself in dense treatises on elemental theories, meticulously studying the fundamental principles that governed fire, earth, wind, and water. He even delved into complex philosophical debates, pondering abstract concepts that would have undoubtedly lulled most adults into a deep slumber. "Mema," he inquired one crisp autumn afternoon, his voice surprisingly clear and articulate for a boy his age, as his small finger traced a delicate diagram within a worn book on natural magic. This illustration depicts the flow of chi or mana through the meridians of the land. It refers to it as the breath of the world. Would it not be a more accurate conceptualization to understand it as a low-frequency energy resonance, significantly influenced by the planet's tectonic shifts and localized atmospheric distortions? Lady Alara, initially caught off guard by his precise and almost clinical vocabulary, the terminology far exceeding what one would expect from a child of his years, simply offered a gentle smile, a look of profound understanding in her eyes. "That is how the wise ones of old perceived it, my brilliant Isekay. The breath of the world, the vital essence that gives life and strength to all living things." While she might not always fully comprehend the nuances of his advanced terminology, she recognized the remarkable depth and originality of his thought, the insightful perspective that lay beneath his youthful exterior. As the years passed, and he transitioned from a curious child to a thoughtful preteen boy, Ezekiel's internal map of Viridia's intricate systems grew increasingly detailed and sophisticated. He continued to observe his elder siblings, Lord Kalen and Lady Lyra, in their daily magical practice, his understanding evolving beyond mere observation. Kalen's seemingly effortless conjuration of towering earth walls was no longer simply an impressive display of raw power in Ezekiel's eyes. He now perceived it as an elegant and precise manipulation of the molecular bonds within the very soil, a subtle rearrangement of fundamental particles. Lyra's vibrant fireballs, those captivating spheres of heat and light, were not merely conjured from thin air. Ezekiel understood them as controlled exothermic reactions, initiated by the accelerated vibration of unsubmicals, skillfully confined and directed by her innate magical talent. He grasped the underlying mechanics behind their seemingly effortless magic, even as his own physical form remained too fragile for such strenuous applications of power. His own subtle and almost imperceptible manifestations of control over the elusive unsubmicals became more frequent, though always on a scale small enough to be readily dismissed by the observant adults as mere uncanny coincidence or a stroke of good fortune. When he found himself particularly vexed by a complex wooden puzzle, the intricate pieces might audibly click into their correct positions seemingly on their own, leaving him with a quiet sense of satisfaction, an almost smug internal notation on the efficiency of focused intent. A beloved toy soldier, once inexplicably lost within the overgrown hedges of the expansive Manhwa Gardens, would mysteriously reappear on his bedside table the following morning, nestled amongst his other treasures. These seemingly minor events were, in reality, his quiet experiments, crucial data points meticulously collected and analyzed within the vast and ever-expanding program of his understanding. Meanwhile, in the opulent halls of her celestial abode, Xylos, the enigmatic being overseeing this reality, continued to grapple with her own perplexing predicament. The baffling cravings that plagued her and the persistent, inexplicable urge to monitor the peculiar child named Ezekiel remained a source of considerable annoyance. His just learning, she would huff with dramatic exasperation to her attendant angels, who could only offer silent bows of utter incomprehension. Learning words. When he should be worshipping me. This is most inconvenient. Utterly consumed by her own celestial petulance, she remained blissfully unaware of the profound cosmic irony unfolding beneath her very nose. Her unique problem child was, in fact, diligently and quite methodically, preparing to debug and optimize the very universe that she so haphazardly managed. The grand program of Joel's new life, now running under the designation Ezekiel Manhwa, was compiling at an astonishing rate, each new word learned and each fundamental particle observed representing a fresh line of meticulously written code. And young Ezekiel, the architect of his own understanding, was eagerly anticipating the moment of its full and glorious execution. For Ezekiel, the agreement to learn to read and write with his mother was not a simple act of childish eagerness, but a crucial reprioritization in his meticulously constructed mental action plan. His internal SWOT analysis had clearly highlighted the mortal brain as a weakness, a bottleneck for his high processing power when asleep. Language, he quickly deduced, was the most fundamental interface for this world's conscious operation. He needed to install the correct drivers for his physical system. His grand project of optimizing Viridia, and indeed, his own existence within it, had to begin with this seemingly mundane, yet utterly indispensable, foundational skill. He mentally reshuffled his internal cue. Direct observation of magic, while important, could run in the background. Active language acquisition moved to the foreground. Lady Alara began his lessons in the quiet solace of the sun-drenched study. The room, usually filled with the rustle of turning pages and the scent of aged parchment, now echoed with the gentle cadence of her voice and the rhythmic scratch of stylus on wax. She would sit beside him at a low table, a collection of wooden tablets before them, each shallowly recessed and filled with a thin, smooth layer of beeswax. "This is a," Lady Alara would begin, her finger, slender and graceful, tracing the first letter into the soft wax. "It is for Ava, the great river, the source of life." Ezekiel's golden eyes, usually alight with an almost unnerving intelligence, narrowed in intense focus. He observed the precise pressure his mother applied, the angle of her hand, the deliberate flow of her strokes. His earthly mind, accustomed to the instantaneous precision of a keyboard or the fluid movements of a digital pen, found the physicality of Viridian writing both fascinating and maddeningly imprecise. The reed pen they sometimes used, with its blunt, slightly frayed tip, felt alien in his small fingers. It demanded a deliberate, almost meditative control to produce consistent lines, much like a Roman stylus, though these were designed for parchment, not wax. For daily practice, however, the wax tablets proved indispensable. Lady Alara would hand him a sharpened wooden stylus, and Ezekiel would painstakingly mimic her movements, pressing the tip into the soft surface. His first attempts were a chaotic mess of gouges and squiggles, a stark contrast to the precise, repeating geometric patterns he scrawled on his bedroom wall. "Not quite, Ezekiel," Lady Alara would gently correct, her hand guiding his. "More softly here," then a firm push downwards. Each letter was a battle, a physical manifestation of his mortal brain grappling with a new motor skill. He could understand the concept of the letter instantly, logically categorize its sound and meaning, but transferring that understanding to the clumsy movements of his small hand required immense concentration. He felt the minute muscles in his fingers ache, the tendons strain. This was not just learning, this was training. He was building fine motor control, strengthening the neural pathways between his sophisticated intellect and his developing physical form. The beauty of the wax tablets quickly became apparent. When a page was filled with his messy attempts, Lady Alara would simply hold the tablet over a small, contained flame, allowing the wax to soften and melt back into a smooth, blank surface. "See, my darling," she would explain, demonstrating the process. "Always fresh, always ready for new learning." Ezekiel's analytical mind immediately recognized the efficiency. No wasted materials, endless opportunities for repetition. He understood that these wax tablets were not merely tools for learning, but a fundamental method for saving and acquiring the precious, and scarce, writing materials of Viridia. He instinctively began to care for them, learning to properly clean and prepare the wax himself, recognizing their value. Every etched line, every corrected stroke, was not just a lesson in language, but a rigorous exercise in motor control, a silent contribution to the muscle training that would eventually allow his body to keep pace with the vast, ancient soul residing within him. He was building the fundamental hardware that would soon run the complex software of his true abilities. As Ezekiel's command over the Viridian alphabet grew under Lady Alara's patient tutelage, he began to notice a peculiar fluidity in the script. His mother, for all her graceful instruction, would sometimes render the same character with subtle variations. This unsettled his earth-trained mind, accustomed to rigid code. He recognized the underlying structure, each consonant carrying an inherent vowel, modified by diacritics, a system eerily reminiscent of the Babayan script from his past life, or even the vowel-less intricacies of Hebrew. There was no formal, standardized base of writing here, he realized, no immutable font to adhere to. "Mama," he asked one afternoon, his stylus poised over the wax tablet, "you teach me many words. But not my own. Please, can you teach me how to write my name, Ezekiel? And the name you call me, Isekay?" He hoped seeing his own names, side by side, would illuminate this baffling inconsistency. Lady Alara smiled, delighted by his request. On a freshly smoothed wax tablet, she gracefully inscribed Ezekiel. Then, beneath it, Isekay. "There, Ezekiel," she said, presenting it. "Your names. Can you write them again, Mama?" he asked, observing intently. She obliged, but as she wrote, Ezekiel's sharp eyes immediately caught the subtle deviations, a slightly different curve here, an added flourish there. "They are different," he pointed out, a tiny frown on his brow. "Which one is the right one?" Lady Alara leaned closer, her warmth enveloping him. "Ah, Ezekiel," she murmured. "They are all right. The beauty of our writing is that you can freely write it the way you want. It is an expression, not a fixed rule. As long as it is legible, it carries your own spirit." Ezekiel absorbed her words, a storm of data in his mind. Freely write it the way you want. It was a concept at odds with every logical framework he knew, yet it was undeniably the truth of Viridia. Each practice session on the reusable wax tablets, etching and re-etching his names, became not just a lesson in linguistics, but a rigorous exercise in muscle memory and adaptation, training his physical body to accommodate a world that embraced fluid expression over rigid standardization. He was debugging a new kind of operating system, one where the code shifted with the whims of the scribe. Nonetheless, Ezekiel clearly identified the lack of standardization in the Viridian alphabet as a problem he intended to rectify in the future. Alongside his morning studies, he gradually incorporated early morning exercises like stretching and calisthenics into his routine. He felt no immediate need to focus on running, as his days were already filled with plenty of movement. For him, his mental and intellectual development remained the paramount priority within his personal growth program, contrasting with his older siblings who received formal tutoring. He observed the world around him with a critical eye, especially the physical structures. Their family abode, though grand by local standards, struck him as a little skewed, walls that weren't quite plumb, corners that weren't perfectly square. He noticed that the construction methods seemed entirely devoid of proper calculations or even the use of standard measurements. Buildings were erected based on tradition, eyeballing, and accumulated experience, rather than any applied mathematics. The only exposure to mathematics he was slated to receive, he learned, would be rudimentary counting for money or other civic uses, and that wouldn't even begin until he reached the age of 6. A deep sense of wonder, tinged with a familiar frustration, simmered within him. Why? He thought, his ancient soul recoiling from such inefficiency and lost knowledge. Roche's words echoed in his mind from the limbo realm. Previous civilizations on Viridia had existed, and surely, they would have developed such fundamental concepts as mathematics. But the wanton sacrificial offerings, which Roche had described as a mass murder in a religiously commercial way, must have systematically eradicated the learned ones, severing the vital link that allowed knowledge to be passed to the next generation. The intellectual lineage had been broken, leaving this world with only fragments of its past wisdom, a stark contrast to the cumulative progress of Earth. The simplicity of their counting, the crookedness of their buildings, it was all a testament to a dark, forgotten chapter of destruction, a void where scientific and mathematical understanding should have flourished. The wax tablets, once a source of purely motoric frustration, transformed into conduits of raw information for Ezekiel. Each perfectly etched letter, each flowing word, represented not just sound, but a conceptual package ready for his ancient soul to unpack. He was rapidly absorbing the Viridian tongue, mastering its peculiar nuances even as he internally critiqued its fundamental design. Its system of inherent vowels, modified by subtle diacritics, was a clear abugida, much like the Baybayin script of ancient Tagalog or Bisayan, or even the complex Tamil he'd once researched on Earth. He found himself often thinking of Hebrew, a language he'd dabbled in, with its perplexing absence of vowels, forcing context to carry immense weight. Viridia's script, for all its charm, lacked a standardized, formalized structure, a flaw he already earmarked for future rectification. "Mama," Ezekiel asked one sun-drenched morning, his stylus poised over the fresh wax, "you teach me the letters, but you've never shown me my own. Please, can you teach me how to write my formal name, Ezekiel? And the name you call me, Isekay?" He watched intently as Lady Alara, maintaining her formal address during their lessons, elegantly inscribed the two names. Yet, even as he studied them, he noticed the subtle, almost imperceptible variations in her strokes each time she rewrote them. "They are different," he pointed out, his brow furrowed in a tiny, logical protest. "Which one is the right one?" Lady Alara simply chuckled, a melodic sound. "Ah, Ezekiel," she murmured, brushing his hair back. "They are all right. The beauty of our writing, unlike the rigid lines of the scribes of old, is that you can freely write it the way you want. It is an expression, not a fixed rule. As long as it is legible, it carries your own spirit." This notion of fluid, non-standardized expression grated against his programmer's mind, yet it was an undeniable truth of this world. He'd have to account for it. His education, he quickly realized, was almost non-existent beyond these basics. His mother taught him how to count, add, and subtract, basic arithmetic that left him yearning for more. "Mama," he probed one afternoon, pushing his wooden counting beads aside, "if 3 herds of cattle have 10 beasts each, and then 2 herds lose 2 beasts, how many beasts are left? And how many groups are there?" Lady Alara paused, counting on her fingers, her brow furrowing slightly. "That is a very big number, Ezekiel. Why do you need to know such big numbers? We only count for coins, or how many baskets of grain we have. The priests handle the larger counts." She smiled, but her eyes held a hint of discomfort at the abstract complexity. "Our numbers are for what we see and touch, little one." It sucks, he thought, suppressing a sigh. Their numerical system, a basic tally-based method, was painfully inefficient. Roche's words about lost knowledge echoed in his mind, and this was glaring evidence. His mother, however, excelled in teaching him the broader strokes of Viridian society. "The government," she explained, often referring to Lord Riel, "rules the people, Ezekiel. And they protect the people. For what is there to rule if there are no people to protect?" This simplistic, almost circular logic reminded him of the Visayan Datu system from his past life, where a Datu ruled and protected his Timawa, middle managers, and Ulipon, commoners, debt-bound individuals, their power intertwined with the people they governed. "Mama," Ezekiel asked, pivoting to another perplexing topic, "which god do we worship?" Lady Alara looked at him, her expression serene. "We worship Adlor, my dearest. He is the giver of light, the provider of everything. He sets the laws for us to follow, and his warmth nourishes the crops." Her voice took on a gentle, almost proselytizing tone, her eyes distant as if seeing something profound. "Have you met Adlor, Mama?" he asked, his golden eyes wide and innocent. She laughed softly, a nervous flutter in her voice. "Oh, Ezekiel, no, no. We humble mortals cannot simply meet the gods. They are so holy, so powerful. Our mortal forms would surely perish in their presence. And besides," she added, straightening her tunic, "the gods are far too busy with their divine duties to have time for silly mortals like us." "So, they are real," he pressed, his scientific mind probing. "But if no one has ever met one, how do we know?" "Of course they are real, my curious boy," she insisted, though her answers became more generalized, resembling descriptions of natural phenomena. "Adlor is the sun, is he not? Does he not rise every day, bringing light and warmth? That is his presence. And there is Luna, who watches over the night, and Subang, who brings the rains, and Amihan, who brings the winds." She named a few more gods revered within their county. "Are there female gods among those you mentioned, Mama?" he asked. Oh, yes, she confirmed, naming a few more goddesses, but none were Xylos. Luna, for example, is a goddess. Is there a god of Viridia, the one who created it all? He asked, trying to find a parallel to Rosh or even Xylos in their pantheon. Lady Alara paused, then vaguely gestured towards the sky. Adlor created everything, Ezekiel. All that we see, all that is, comes from Adlor's light. And who created the gods, Mema? He inquired, pushing the metaphysical boundary. This time, she genuinely faltered. Her eyes widened slightly, and she shook her head. No one, my child. The gods have always been. She quickly changed the subject. Now, shall we practice our numbers again? Ezekiel persisted, a final query bubbling up. Is there a god named Xylos? His mother seemed to sift through a mental catalogue of divine names, a slight frown of concentration on her face. Xylos? She repeated slowly. I do not recall that name, Ezekiel. But there are many gods, my dear. Some, I suppose, do not have worshippers, or perhaps they belong to lands far away. Her nonchalance was striking. She doesn't even know her. He thought, a flicker of cosmic amusement in his golden eyes. He also learned about their religious practices. Sacrifices to the gods involved burning meat at town or barony centers. He observed that they never fully burned the meat, only a few parts were initially charred, and then the rest was eaten by the community. It was a communal feast, a ritual of appeasement and sustenance. As he grew a little older, Lord Riel, his father, began to involve him more directly in discussions of their family's domain and its protection. His father, a seasoned warrior and ruler, possessed a far more adept practical knowledge than his mother. Protection, Isekay, Lord Riel explained one evening, using his affectionate family name, is keeping what is ours. There are other people who want our land, and so we must go and fight them. That is what your Uncle Gareth and I do. Their piece of the pie, as his father called it, stretched roughly 100 miles to the west, north, and south, and included the sea to the east. Unique natural barriers of towering cliffs protected them, and even the beach, serving as an outpost, was fortified by high cliffs, though these were for watching portents rather than external invaders. Lord Riel recounted several incidents of war, battles fought to defend their borders. He explained their network of outposts high in the mountains, hundreds of miles away from the main cliff lines, offering views for miles across arid plains or patches of green. Travel to these outposts was difficult due to the dense forests. But we are relatively safe, Lord Riel assured him, his hand resting on his sword hilt. We watch, and we fight when we must. It was clear that noble parents and rulers like themselves taught their children directly, as there was no one else truly qualified to teach such vital knowledge. Ezekiel's internal analysis began to synthesize these observations with his earthly knowledge. Their society, for all its textile production, was surprisingly primitive in other ways. They had little formal agriculture and seemed to avoid going out to sea. Crucially, there was no animal husbandry. Their meat came almost entirely from hunting in the vast, wild forests. This was a colossal inefficiency, a glaring vulnerability. One morning, Ezekiel sought out his father, Lord Riel, who was inspecting the training yard. Papa, Isekay began, his voice clear and earnest, I have been thinking about the animals. Lord Riel turned, a curious look on his face. The animals? What of them, little one? Did you see a particularly large stag in the woods? No, Papa. The animals we hunt. The wild beasts. We go into the jungle, or the forest, and we hunt them, yes. Indeed, Isekay. It is a manhwa tradition. Your brothers are becoming quite skilled hunters. But Papa, these animals, they have babies, yes? And the babies grow, and then they have more babies. Lord Riel nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. That is the way of nature, my son. The cycle of life. And humans also have babies, and the babies grow, and then they have more babies, Ezekiel continued, drawing the parallel. But we do not go into the forest to find our babies, or wait for them to grow by themselves in the wild, do we? We keep them here, in our homes, and we feed them and protect them, and then they grow into strong people. Lord Riel's smile wavered slightly, a flicker of confusion. No, Isekay, we raise our children, of course. What is your point? Ezekiel pressed on, his logic relentless. If we have a corner, Papa, a space where we can keep the animals. And if we feed them, like we feed our own, and protect them, like we protect our own, then they will have babies in that corner, will they not? And those babies will grow, and have more babies, right there, without us having to go into the dangerous jungle. Lord Riel's eyes widened, a slow dawning of realization replacing his amusement. He looked at his son, truly looked at him, seeing not just a clever child but a mind grappling with a profound, practical truth. Heard them, in a corner, he murmured, a revolutionary concept unfolding in his mind. And they would produce more? Continuously? Without the hunt? The implications were staggering: constant food, less danger, more manpower for other tasks. Yes, Papa, Ezekiel affirmed, his golden eyes shining with the pure logic of the idea. Plenty of livestock. Always. Without the jungle. Lord Riel stood silent for a long moment, then clapped his son firmly on the shoulder, a newfound respect in his gaze. By the gods, Isekay, he breathed, a hint of awe in his voice. That changes everything. His programmer's son had just laid out the blueprint for an agricultural revolution. Somewhere up in her glittering heavenly abode, Xylos fumed, her golden eyes flashing with irritation. She had been idly observing her little problem child, Ezekiel, and his mortal mother, catching snippets of their mundane conversations about the gods of Viridia. The more she listened, the tighter her perfectly sculpted jaw became. Adlaw this, Adlaw that, she muttered to herself, her melodious voice laced with venom. Giver of light, provider of everything, created it all. The absolute gore. It was my summoning machine, the magnificent Sulad 1000C, that brought that soul to Viridia. I oversee the passage. And who created the gods? Adlaw always was? Oh, the sheer, unmitigated ignorance. Her ethereal form began to shimmer with suppressed rage. She longed to reach down, to lash out, to make the sun dim over the Manhwa estate, to turn their precious Adlaw's warmth to a blistering inferno, or perhaps just curse their fields until nothing grew but bitter weeds. How dare they attribute such grand acts to some nameless, formless Adlaw, when she, Xylos, the glorious goddess, was right here, managing the very flow of souls. The ungrateful, clueless mortals. But then, a cold wave washed over her, a prickle of discomfort that went deeper than her petty indignation. It was the familiar, steely gaze of Anahita, the compliance goddess, an unseen but palpable pressure from across the cosmic void. Xylos flinched, her magnificent wings fluttering anxiously. No, 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 she whined, clutching at her chest. I can't punish them. Not now. A terrifying realization solidified in her mind. Ezekiel, that strangely compelling child, was the first soul she had consciously brought forth to comply with the divine council's mandate of maintaining population growth. He was her initial, crucial step towards adherence. If she were to indulge her wrath and lash out at the mortals, particularly his family, she might accidentally extinguish his essence. And then Anahita's unspoken warning echoed in her mind: non-compliance. Losing her domain. Losing her very essence of existence. The thought sent a shiver through her. It was a humiliating, unbearable prospect. Ooh, this is just intolerable, she huffed, pacing her heavenly pavilion. To be so utterly, undeniably correct, and yet be forbidden from correcting such ridiculous, blasphemous notions. Who created the gods? No one, they always were. They have no idea. None. And that little soul, Ezekiel, asking if I exist, and his mother says maybe, some gods have no worshippers. Oh, the absolute indignity. It's simply not fair that I cannot explain the glory of my own creation, all because of rules. She threw her hands up, exasperated, her golden aura flickering with impotent fury. And those endless cravings. This inexplicable irritability. Why must I suffer these mortal indignities while those insignificant beings prattle on about their imaginary deities? It's enough to make a goddess scream. She let out a long, theatrical sigh, her frustration echoing through her celestial domain. Just wait until I can be truly non-compliant. Then they'll see. Then they'll all see.